The Pokemon series is arguably one of, if not the most popular franchise on any Nintendo system. Whenever a new mainline entry comes out, millions of people flock out and buy and enjoy trading their Pokemon, whilst also battling and trading with their mates. And many have been anticipating Sword and Shield, the first proper mainline entry in the series to appear on a home console. So a lot has been riding on this, and ever since E3 there's been a lot of controversy over the title due to its graphics and lack of a national decks. But now the dust has settled down, I've been ploughing through the title to bring you my review of the latest in the Pokemon franchise. So let's see if the game deserves a hate or not. Here's my review of Pokemon Sword and Shield. Starting off Sword and Shield, it's pretty much standard and typical Pokemon as it gets. You're a young lad or girl who lives in a nice town with their mum, and you get your first little Pokemon starter. You either get Grookey, Scorbunny or Sobble. The choice is up to you. I went for Grookey. Once you get your Pokemon and your mate gets a starter Pokemon, you set off on a quest to be the best like no one ever was by defeating all the gym leaders, battling many trainers and trying to ultimately catch them all. This time the game is set in the Gala region, which is loosely based on the UK, with lovely idyllic landscape full of green and loads of sheep, very much like the UK. Also the gyms are rather quite different here and are treated more like a sporting event like a football tournament. It's rather nice and a refreshing change, but apart from that the story is your typical light and enjoyable fluff with the occasional peril here and there. Not the best Pokemon story, but still a decent one nevertheless. On to the gameplay now, and if you played a Pokemon game before then you know exactly what you're getting here. Normally when playing Pokemon games at the beginning it can get a little bit handholdy to get to new players to give them the basics of the game, but thankfully Sword and Shield pretty much lets the reins off straight away, which is great, allowing you to be on your merry way. Like all Pokemon games, you go from town to town with different routes in between, full of plenty of opportunities to catch a few Pokemon whilst going up against a few trainers. It's all your typical stuff, but thankfully there is no more random encounters as all the Pokemon are visible on the screen, very much like in the recent Dragon Quest XI. You can see all the wild Pokemon around to choose to fight who you want. It's an incredibly refreshing change that was brought in with the Let's Go game, as older games with the random encounters could get very annoying, especially if you wanted to catch them all and all you was getting was a Zubat. But by far its biggest change is in the new highly advertised wild area, which is fairly decent sized open world area with its own movable camera, a first for the series. You're let loose in the wild area actually quite early on in the game and it does feel like a revolution at first, but soon the shine wears off as the area is a bit too small, but thankfully later on in the game it does open up a bit more, delivering a big area, and it is all the better for it. There is a fair amount to do in the wild area, from catching many different Pokemon, some which are exclusive to that area and dependent on time and weather, to different secret items and other players roaming about. Then there's also these stones that has powerful Pokemon called max raids, and these see you either on your own or preferably with others fighting an incredibly powerful Pokemon. Trying to beat these Pokemon on your own will be rather hard, but with others it will be a bit more manageable, and honestly it adds a great social element to the game. Once you complete these raids you then get a chance to nab them on to add to your collection. It feels rather similar to the raid battles in Pokemon Go, and that's no bad thing. Overall, the wild area is a nice environment. It would have been lovely if the whole game was set out in a fully explorable 3D environment instead of returning to 2D planes for the normal routes and towns though. A staple of the series has always been its gyms, beating all 8 and then getting a chance to beat the Elite Four, and in Sword and Shield we arguably have the best collection of gyms to date. Each one is a huge massive affair where you first have to solve a collection of puzzles to reach the gym leader. Along the way you have to battle a few challenges as well, but once you're done with that you then face the gym leader and you're treated to a real visual treat. Each and every gym leader here really feels like their own person with plenty of personality between them all. The gym leader battles see you appear on what looks to be a football pitch and you have your Pokemon battle, but the final Pokemon in the gym leader's selection always Dynamax. Yes, the highly advertised feature of Dynamaxing sees your Pokemon get incredibly huge and incredibly powerful, and whilst it is a visual treat to see two Dynamax and Pokemon fighting against each other, I wouldn't say I'm overly keen on it. You can't Dynamax when you want, only in specific fights, and at the end of the day it just feels a bit of a gimmick. There's quite a few handy new quality of life improvements, such as the ability to have your Pokemon box which stores all your excess Pokemon with you on the go. It's the series first and saves a lot of time from running about to the Poke Center to pick up a new Pokemon. Another neat new addition is that there's a guy at each Poke Center that allows you to rename your Pokemon, teach them new skills, and also forget skills, which again saves a lot of time running around willy-nilly to different NPCs all over the map. We also have a new mechanic called Pokemon Camp, which sees you set up camp and allows you and your team of Pokemon to play around with Nintendo dogs like mini games and also feed them curry, because we all know Pokemon love a curry or two. These curries have their own boosts and perks which are handy, and there's also a curry dex full of different curries to make, if you're into that sort of stuff. As the norm with new Pokemon gens, there's always a new collection of Pokemon to nab, and here we have a good collection of 80 or so new ones to nab, with a few regional variants for older Pokemon like Mr. Mime and Meowth. There's also a collection of older Pokemon from many of the game's previous generations as well. But on to the game's biggest controversy now, the lack of a national dex. With previous Pokemon games there's always been the national dex that allows you to bring over every single Pokemon from previous games, even if it wasn't in the base game. But Sword and Shield has ditched this feature, meaning out of the nearly 900 Pokemon there's actually only around 400 in Sword and Shield. Now this has angered a lot of fans, with many boycotting the game entirely. The reason for the lack of Pokemon is due to trying to render all the Pokemon for this game, and I can understand where they're coming from. But there is a feeling that some of the graphics have literally been upscaled from the 3DS, but since launch the game is getting a hefty expansion pack that will launch in 2 packs in the summer and winter, and included in these packs will be a whole host of new and returning Pokemon from older gens. But thankfully you don't need to buy the expansions to get the new Pokemon, you can get them by trading, which is pretty reasonable. But I do think the reason why the National Dex wasn't in here was probably due to this new DLC pack coming. Probably. Pokemon games have always been a pixelated delight on the Game Boy and DS days, and did expand into some wonderful looking titles on the 3DS, featuring more bolder and exciting environments. The Switch's first Pokemon games, the Let's Go titles, were decent looking affairs with some lovely bright and colourful areas. But in Sword and Shield we're seeing a more ambitious title, as with the aforementioned wild area. It may be small, but it does show how a future Pokemon title could look. The rest of the game areas are very traditional routes that follow straight roads that lead to the next area, with not much room for exploration. But the graphics themselves do look rather lovely, with some impressive looking areas, but again some areas such as the character animations and character models feel incredibly dated, from the exactly the same looking NPCs all over the place to Pokemon renderers looking similar to the 3DS counterparts. It's all rather off-putting. Another issue is the frame rate issues that plague the wild areas, which can be incredibly off-putting, as there are constant pop-in that are very apparent in both the wild areas and towns. Recent patches have moderately improved it, but there's a fair bit of improvement to be had for future entries. Audio wise now, the game soundtrack is pretty much standard Pokemon fare, featuring a great selection of upbeat high tempo tracks. The battle themes are very catchy and a great listen. The Pokemon alas still do the normal moans and groans that have been here since the early days, and it does feel a little bit dated now, and it would have been better if they could say their actual names like they do in the anime. Also, voice acting is desperately needed as the game's cutscenes feel a bit strange without them. Conclusion time now, and Pokemon Sword and Shield is a very fun and enjoyable mainline debut for the series on Switch, continuing the same old great classic gameplay of catching, training and raising Pokemon still never gets old, and the game does do a fair share of fantastic quality of life improvements like normal random encounters and the PC always being on hand. The wild area is a bold new addition that is a blast to play, and is a step in the right direction for the series. But for all the great things about the game, it does suffer from technical issues, the lack of a national dex and some visual issues. But even after all that, the game is so darn charming, enjoyable, and incredibly addictive. So with that, I'm giving Pokemon Sword and Shield an 8 out of 10 with the title of great. Thank you for watching my review. Like, rate, and subscribe. And until next time, happy gaming. Bye.